Hi. I wanted to jump on today to talk about sibling conflict. It comes up a lot, and you may even remember having issues with your sibling. And siblings are funny, right? It's like any kind of relationship, even with our partner. And during this time, we've been together more. Those little things that drive us crazy just drive us crazy even more. And having a little bit of conflict is normal. It's very different than rivalry. Conflict is normal. People that are struggling in their marriage, they will say, or in their relationship, they'll say, like, the passion's kind of gone. We don't really fight with each other. It's just like whatever. So having a little bit of conflict is normal. And when that goes away, when we don't really care what the other person thinks or whatever, like that's, that actually will tell you that something's up. So when your siblings, when your kids are fighting, we have kids and sometimes we have them close together and we have these fantasies that they're going to be best friends and everything's going to be wonderful. Is that actually the way that you are with your sibling? Were you always close with your sibling? Was there ever a time that you had conflict? So trying to put it into perspective. And also depending on the age of the kids, right? Some children will actually be too far apart to really get it. Like some parents will have their kids and they're really far apart. And we're looking at like 5 years apart or even 3 years apart when they are like one's 9 or like one's 6 and one's 3. Like that's a big difference. A 6-year-old versus a 3-year-old can be a really big difference, or a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old can be a big difference. So understanding where they're at, and depending on the child, I mean, some kids are 9, but they act more like they're 7. And then they've got an older sibling that really doesn't want to hang out with them. And sometimes we expect that siblings will take care of the other kids, right? And depending on how old the older child is, they might think like, I don't want to babysit this kid. This was your idea, So thinking about that. So that kind of conflict is normal. When you start getting into issues is rivalry. Rivalry can be really tough because that's when there's a conflict in personalities and kids are struggling with liking each other. And I get a lot of that. In my parent consultations, I have a lot of parents that come to me with children that are behavioral, that kind of push buttons a little bit more. Their behavior is a little more triggering. And parents sometimes have a hard time with their kids because they can't understand why they're acting the way that they are. So you can imagine that when siblings, how they feel. And what I hear a lot of times is, this kid is giving issues to you and you need to punish them more. They need to be taught a lesson. You're not doing a very good job. And I validate the parents to say, I know this is really tough and you're working so hard, but your child has a difficult temperament. They've got ADHD or they've got, whatever that is. So that can be really hard for the sibling to understand. And you don't need to get into too much of that, but maybe you do need to sit down to have a conversation and say, I'm noticing that you're taking on the adult role. I'm noticing that you're really having a hard time dealing with your sibling. You don't really want to spend time with them. Help me understand what's going on. Where is that conflict coming from and that rivalry? So that's something to think about as well with your kids is like, well, what is going on? Is this a personality conflict? Is the one child very passive aggressive, but the other one is more aggressive and just gets in trouble more often? Do they really have things in common? And if they do feel like it's unfair, that the other child's behavior or personality is really off-putting to them, how do we start building those connections? This is a really tough thing to do and sometimes to figure out. And that's why parents do reach out and get support with me. And the other thing too is that I have a great Facebook group, and over there we can talk about things a little bit more and ask more questions, and people feel like they can do those things in that closed group. So if you do feel like you have questions, if you can resonate with this, feel free to send me a DM. You can also check out my blog and my YouTube videos and things like that. Things might be resonating with you. And of course, you can always join us in our Facebook group, Overworked to Overjoyed. I go live once a week in there as well. And I'm listening to what everybody wants. So when you come into my group and you tell me what your question is, what your struggle is, that's what I'm basing my lives on. I'm not coming up with the content that's going to work for me, because I want to make sure that you're feeling heard and that it's really relevant to you. So I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please list them below or send me a message. I'd be happy to support you. Take care, guys. Have a good night.